Hello, welcome everyone. We are thrilled that you're here today, and today we're speaking about the big bad imposter syndrome. This comes up a lot. It comes up in regular conversations with friends. It comes up when we are coaching leaders. And today we're going to share some techniques that as coaches we have used with clients to work on imposter syndrome. So before we start, we're all going to go around and say who we are. We are all coaches at Silicon Valley Change. We are all MyCoach coaches. And we're each going to say who we are, where we're located, and where we next want to go when things start to open up again. So I'll go first. I'm Senya. I'm in the Bay Area, and I want to go to Alaska. That's where I would like to go. Let's go to Alex.
Okay, well, hi, I am Alex, and I am in sunny Florida. And first place I'll be going back to, I guess, is Hawaii. Big Island, to be specific.
Nice choice. Nice choice. Kelly?
I'm Kelly, and I am in Cincinnati, Ohio. And the first place I will go or want to go is LA to visit my son and his husband. I want to hug on them.
Physically.
I haven't seen them in over a year. So, yes.
Eileen.
And I'm Eileen Schaefer. I'm based in San Diego, California. And I think in terms of the first big trip we'll do is we'll actually do the trip we had to cancel as a family and go to Greece. So that is the biggie one. But probably in between that, I'll visit my daughter in college, going off of what Kelly said. So.
And for you who are with us today, we also hope that you have an idea or a plan or someplace that you maybe enjoy going once we all can. Imposter syndrome. I've asked Kelly to start us off with just situations that she's run into where people have had experiences where they may have described that they have imposter syndrome. So Kelly, would you start us off and we'll all jump in?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome being the feeling of a collection of feelings of inadequacy despite evident success. And that's an important piece of the imposter syndrome, because most people who have imposter syndrome, I feel like, are you kidding me? Because you're so successful. How do you have it? Right? If you have it, then I'm sure I have it, that kind of thing. And it's been from clients who are graduate students, get a doctorate, and then become professors in the same school that, let's say, they got a doctorate in. Hello. And it was a different school, but one I had been teaching at. And then, nurses who are nursing students and maybe they're patient care attendants or aides, and then they become an RN, and now they're an RN and they don't feel like they've made that step yet. They've graduated from school and attained their licensure. I see it in executives who go from a tech or analyst or some type of communication, individual support, and then they become the manager. And I'm like, who am I to do this? There are a lot of smart people around me. Why me? And those are the kind of examples that readily come to mind.
Yeah. Let's all jump on either with additional examples or even what we hear people say when they're speaking with us, and we start to recognize that this may be imposter syndrome. I'll jump in with one example that's a little different but very similar to Kelly's, which is, Kelly, you've mentioned a lot of transition times, like transitioning from individual contributor to manager. I would also say within the same role I've seen. So let's say somebody's been a VP, but at this point, their role involves doing more board presentations or more speaking or more external interviews. So it might not, technically your role may not have changed, but there might be things that involve doing more things outside one's comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the same, Senya. It's either launching into the next stage or it's you're in your same role, but it's unfamiliar territory. I think that's when it gets triggered, is when it's something new. So you could be in the same role for 20 years, but you're now doing something new and different. And that unfamiliar territory triggers something in your brain that says, are you good enough? Do you really know this? They think you do, but I don't know that you do. So.
Yeah, and to your point, Senya, where you mentioned that, they're executives and Kelly as well, usually people that experience imposter syndrome, they tend to be people that have already achieved something because and they've accomplished a lot of stuff. But I think one of the key factors is the fact that they don't actually acknowledge the stuff that they've already achieved, or they discount it or devalue it.
Yeah.
And along those lines, I like to think of it as a club that welcomes everybody. You know, when everybody gets to join this club, regardless of if you're fresh out of college or you are Sheryl Sandberg, who addresses it in her book, you know, at the peak of her career. The club is welcome to everybody.
I think that's a great point, Eileen, because if you are not growing, if you're not stepping forward, you won't get it. You won't have imposter syndrome. So the way to prevent it is to not continue to grow, right? Because you get uncomfortable and then you move to a stage or a role or more presentations, those kind of things. And then you step up to the plate and do it. And it's scary and you feel like, who am I to do this? And you get comfortable and then you go the next step and you're uncomfortable again. As long as we're taking steps to be uncomfortable, I don't know that we'll ever go away. There's just ways to kind of live with it. But I don't know that it ever totally goes away.
Let's start with a situation that all of us have been in as coaches. And I would say all of us have probably been in as people as well. What does it start to sound like when a leader that you're working with starts to tell you about their imposter syndrome? What might it sound like? And then we'll move on to some of the first steps that we might take with that person. Anybody, whoever would like to.
Sometimes it comes in the form of surprise. I'm surprised that they asked me to do this, or I'm surprised that, you know, that I was suggested, or they suggested I apply for this or do this talk or what have you. So sometimes it's that kind of like, why they think I should be doing that.
Well, I had an interesting situation where there's someone in senior executive where, you know, they acknowledge the fact that they are great at what they do, but at the same time, they still question, you know. So, and it makes it even more complex. They're also, I guess, on the introvert spectrum of things. So there's the visibility aspect of everything, having to stick your head out, and, you know, but at the same time, they don't really want to put their heads out because, well, who am I? So, you know, and so these are all the other kind of a different aspect of, you know, somebody that I've been working with, actually.
I've had it with executives who have difficulty, like so strong in the role that they've been in, that when they then elevate to the next level, that they talk about the fact that they freeze up. And when someone asks them a question, literally they can't talk. And in delving into it, they're afraid to like kind of show that they don't really be that they're not really deserving of that spot, or that they don't really know. Somebody's going to find them out. And I did the same thing when I was in dissertation, and with my stats, the person on my team who was my statistician, who had also been my professor. And I was so afraid to ask him questions because I'm like, now they'll figure out that I really shouldn't be here. And I was finishing up my dissertation. Now they'll figure me out.
It's so funny. I don't even know where to go with this. It's so universal as I'm hearing what you're saying. Go ahead, Eileen, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. Keep going and then I'll say after.
One other thing, like Eileen noticed surprise, I notice comparison. So I hear a comparison. For example, other VPs have been presenting to external audiences for a long time. This is new for me. So I hear comparison sometimes when I hear imposter syndrome like comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I was just going to say along those lines, what I love about imposter syndrome becoming, it's almost like the veil of imposter syndrome has been lifted, because years ago in graduate school, we talked about it as a psychological construct, but it wasn't in mainstream dialogue. And what's so important is that we normalize it, and that people realize this isn't just me, it's other people, and there's a defined syndrome. And going along with what Kelly said, I really like, anytime you are going to grow, which hopefully that's what we're all here to do on earth, right? Regardless of what our life looks like, we're here to grow and experience new territory. And so almost thinking of imposter syndrome as part of one of the steps. What if we leaned into it and said, I expect I'm going to feel like an imposter. So that's kind of step one. And then in this new territory, and then what do I need to learn, or how am I going to talk back to it? And we can have a discussion about that. And then eventually I'm going to own it. And this is who I am. This is where I am. And then the next time I take on something new, I'm going to lean right into being an imposter again. It all of a sudden takes away some of the power that imposter voice can have, because it's like, I'm welcoming you in. We're going into new territory. Come join me.
Come join the club.
Exactly.
Right.
Let me tell you what a few people who are with us are saying. They're saying this can happen in career transitions. This can happen with entrepreneurs. And I think, to Kelly's point earlier, failure is the tuition we pay for success.
Woo!
We like what you're saying. And then we have a comment from Anne-Marie, whom we know, that she's had clients who have believed in their own ability, but felt that there were others in the company who had more experience. And their first reaction was, why me? A little like Eileen's surprise and my understanding of comparison. And that feeling was, would others wonder the same thing?
Yeah, that would be powerful if you think, others would be more deserving. And here I am sitting in this role. I've been there too. Wow. Yeah.
So how do we start? As a coach, how do we start with someone who this is a real concern and they don't want to feel this way? How do we start? How do any of you start? Please, whoever would like to jump in.
One of the key things that I like to jump to immediately is kind of let's get rid of the fake news, facts, not fiction. So what are the facts here? Because that's one of the key ways we can talk back, because our brain immediately will join the imposter parade. And so as our brain kind of latches on, you really don't belong here. You really aren't deserving, to say, hey, wait a second. Let me take a minute, exhale, and write down some facts. And those facts might look like past successes. It might look like your education, your experience, whatever facts will help to talk back to that imposter voice.
And then to jump on there with Eileen, after you've established what are the facts, why do I feel this way? I mean, so, why are these facts making me feel, or, the way that I feel? What has led to that, so that you can identify that, even a step further, I would say.
Yeah, the whole thing, I think, I haven't seen this in the research, but it feels to me that it's all around safety, right? And we know our brains they're built for safety. And so when we feel unsafe, then we hold back. So to Eileen's point, okay, so let's jump in and show the evidence, that it's not unsafe out there. I've done similar things. I have clients write lists of prior successes, especially if they're going after something that maybe they have failed at, and now they've come to me for success. Then I have them write lists of when in your life has something been difficult, but you've persisted and you've done it. And that really lifts them up, like, I do belong here. I can do this.
I'd also add one more. I actually feel like we're covering these in the way that we might cover it with a client, this facts, not fiction, that Eileen said, then Alex saying, but why do I feel this way? Let's figure that out, because it's probably going to come up again. We don't want to be a one-trick pony. Safety and lists of prior successes. And then I would add this thing that I refer to as a listening tour. Let's say you're a new CEO and you've joined the company. Of course, you might want to start doing things, but a lot of people, and you see this a lot, they'll do a listening tour. What's important for people? It's actually one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. I was 22 years old and in my first job at Morgan Stanley, and I had a mentor. I was so fortunate to have her. She said, Senya, in the first 3 months, you can ask all the questions you want. You can ask all the questions that seem silly and goofy. It's not going to be as great in month 4. So ask them now. I just always
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really neat way to look at it. And also along those lines too is patience with yourself. You know, allow yourself to just pause, exhale, particularly if you're in a new space, and release some of those expectations to be able to figure out the territory. And, you know, it's kind of almost like when you're doing a house remodel, which I've never done, but I've heard friends talk about this. So if you're doing a house remodel, they say, don't remodel it right when you move in. Live in the house for a while and figure out what needs to change. And then after you've lived in it for a while, make the changes. And so I do have a couple very senior leaders who got into new roles, and they feel this pressure to make changes immediately. And so I use this house analogy. I said, it kind of came to me while they were talking, or while one of them was talking, then I shared it with the other, is what if you really absorbed what's going on and then you make the changes that need to happen. And that also allows you to embrace this imposter syndrome, embrace it, and then step into it with change.
I want to ask a little about that, because a few of you have mentioned that this talk to your imposter syndrome or embrace your imposter syndrome. Can you give a little more context about that? Or what are the best practices of doing something like that? Please, anybody who'd like to.
It's like talking to your other self. When I used to call it Mean Girls. And a few years ago, I've decided to love on that person instead of it being mean, because they're just trying to keep me safe. And so I envision myself as a child who's afraid, and I see myself in a pixie cut in 3rd grade. And so I love on her. And I talk to her about all the successes she's going to have along the way and how scary it's going to be, and that she's worth it and she's enough and she's here. And so as an adult hugging on her, it feels comfy. So I talk to her. I love her.
That is sweet. I also think there's something to be said that sometimes the imposter syndrome might be right. It might be that we're not ready, or we don't have the knowledge, or what have you. And that's happened to me, where I'll check in and say, okay, what's going on? And I realize, you know what, there's more I need to learn, or I want to expand my, it's usually knowledge base. I want to expand my knowledge base here so that I do develop a greater comfort level. So I think as we're going back to what Alex had said is, what's making me feel this way? I don't remember your exact words, but along those lines, checking in to also embrace, oh, there might be a deficit. And what do I want to do with that deficit? Do I want to dive in and not allow that to hold me back anymore? Or maybe I don't care. But that's another piece of it too that I think.
So I was listening to you, and I'm thinking, because one of the things I think that, is a result of imposter syndrome is also this striving for perfection, because I am not good enough. So I have to make sure that my work has to be perfect. Otherwise, they're going to discover that, I am not who they think I am. One of the things you have to, I know I struggle with it as well, because everything is just got to be perfect, and it's perfect. But no, it doesn't have to be perfect. It basically has to be good enough. I think I used this analogy once before. I am not an Olympic swimmer. So does that mean if I'm walking on the boardwalk and I see someone struggling and drowning, and I see, one of those life buoys hanging, that I'm incapable of taking that life buoy and throwing it out? I still can. So, and that is good enough. And so we have to come to accept the fact that, perfection isn't everything, and that striving for perfection is a futile cause. Now, does that mean to say that you don't put your best into it? No. I mean, you strive for excellence, but you don't necessarily strive for perfection.
Alex, you had said, which I love, and it was right around when we were all having a conversation around this a few weeks ago. And Alex, you said something that really struck me that I loved. And I'm going to put it out there, but if you can revise it to be as eloquent as you said it the first time, please do. You said something like, just because you're not an expert doesn't mean you're an imposter. And that I thought was so, it's like, right. You still can have a huge knowledge base. You might not be an expert, but just because you're not an expert doesn't discount all that you do bring to the table. Okay, can you clean that up, Alex, for me now?
Well, you said it. You said it better than me. But it does tie back again to acknowledging, your accomplishments and your achievements, and not devaluing. Or if somebody gives you a compliment, I mean, and again, guilty as charged. Someone would pay me a compliment, and I'd be like, oh yeah, no, it's okay. I play it down because you feel uncomfortable accepting the praise because you think you're an imposter, and they just haven't found you out yet. So you can. So, but by acknowledging your achievements and your accomplishments, yes, I did do this. You know what? And I may not be all the way to where I want to be yet, but I have accomplished this. And by gosh, I know what I'm doing to this point. And once you acknowledge that and accept that, then you realize that you're not an imposter. You are just being you, and that's all that anybody can ask of you to be you, your best self.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in church. That was so good. Yeah. The biggest thing is that I hear it again and again, if you really delve into it, whether it's in my own head or others, is that when are they going to figure me out? Is this the time they're going to figure me out? Is that presentation the time somebody's going to figure it out? Is that client who now is, for the entrepreneurs who are other coaches, I'm sure, on the call, another level up? Now are they going to figure me out? I think that's there's something there that I think is key.
Let's switch to how have the leaders that you've coached started to make progress on this issue? What have you seen? And mine is actually just literally a takeoff of what Kelly just said. I have seen leaders iterate more. And this is to what Alex was saying about perfection. So sometimes a leader will say, I'm going to do a presentation, it has to be perfect. But I've actually seen leaders who are trying to just talk to their imposter syndrome and make it go away and be very reasonable, iterate more and do more. I'm going to show my manager a very rough draft. Then I'm going to show my manager a medium draft. And then I'm actually going to present it and everyone will see it. That way, they feel like all along the line, everyone's on board, or the people who really need to. So at least I've seen that as an aspect of moving forward and both feeling better, but also getting the kind of validation about the actual work product so that it's not, that concern starts to drip away a little bit. Other things you've seen, yeah.
So I do agree with that. And then there's this extra, because with the people that have a hard time accepting compliments because they figured that the people are not being sincere, or they're just being nice to me, or because you still have that imposter syndrome. One of the things that I recommend is that they retreat and have a trusted feedback loop. So people who actually know you, and so that they can actually bolster that level of self-confidence, because the way you think you are is not necessarily the way you're being perceived by everybody else. And if you have a few trusted people in your circle, that you can express, and sometimes that feedback is just really like an eye opener. I remember when I first started out coaching, I really felt like, who am I? I mean, really and truly. And I just did this simple exercise and asked people, just tell me, one or two lines, how did that help you? What change have I made? And the responses were very humbling. And I didn't even realize the extent of, the assistance that I'd been providing. So while you may think, well, this is so, I do this all the time and it doesn't require anything special, but just because it's plain and ordinary for you does not necessarily mean that it's plain and ordinary for somebody else.
Wow, there were so many things there.
I'll be quiet now.
No,
Yeah, good stuff.
love it.
I would say also, it seems so simple, but I think writing down the evidence, it's having visual reminders, visual primers of this is who I am. And I think, we say sticks and stones, may break your bones. Words will never hurt. Words can hurt. Words can stop us. And I think the more we attach to titles, to I'm supposed to be this way, and we have a word attached, back away from that and just, who am I? What do I bring to the table? It releases some of that pressure and that you're supposed to show up in this perfect package. And so writing a list really does help to remind you of what you bring to the table. And having that, my dad used to always, or not used to, he still says, pull the honesty card. Pull the honesty card. If there are gaps in what you have, what do you want to do with those gaps? So be honest with yourself and have what your strengths and then what you could also grow in. And but I know for myself, I've always gotten very hooked or stuck on the word expert. People say, "Oh, Eileen, you're this expert," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm not an expert. I've got a lot to learn," And I realize that my issue with the expert terminology is I'm on this earth to learn and to keep growing. And expert to me feels like a destination. And it's a word that has stopped me. So I've always called myself a specialist. I specialize in this because then that allows me this runway to keep growing. And so if you have a word that stops you, throw the word away and just keep growing into who you are. So.
Beautiful. Yeah. I like to work with my clients with the Byron Katie's 4 questions. Is it true? And we've said that multiple times here, right? So it's yes or no. And usually they're like, yes, it's true. I'm not an expert, or I'm not this, right? And then can you absolutely know it's true? Like if you took it to court, would it pass all 12 jurors? And then how do you react when it happens, or when you believe that thought? Then how do you react? Who are you in that time, at that moment? And then what would you be without that thought? Or who would you be? And I asked a client this once, and she was taking a high stakes exam, and she said, well, I would be, without that thought that I'm not enough, I'd be like Superwoman. I'd be a badass. And I went, whoa, who do you think's going to pass that test? Superwoman, or the one that says, I'm not enough? And she said, well, of course it's the Superwoman. I'm ready.
Wow, that gives me chills, Kelly. I love that story. That's great.
I remember the moment. I remember exactly where I was when she said it, because I thought, holy cow. Yeah. It was a game changer.
Let's round off with 2 closing questions. One is, what is a thought you want to leave everyone that's here with us today with?
I have about 50.
I think I would just say invite the imposter in. I think the more you try to push it away, it's going to keep buttoning up. So invite the imposter in and say, hey, I'm good enough. I'm strong enough. And here's my proof, So open the door up and let the imposter in, because you want to keep growing and it's going to keep popping up.
I would say own it too, and almost in a different way. Yes, exactly, Eileen. But then if you're a leader, own your imposter syndrome to your team members. That let them know that you too have these thoughts. It will relieve them that they're not the only ones, and I think it will give them a sense of safety and belonging.
Oh, I like that, Kelly.
Yeah, I would, like I said, if you're an imposter, who are you posing as?
Oh, that's good. I knew something big was coming.
Sometimes Alex says 5 words, and they're just every one of them matters.
I know.
We're hanging on them.
No, but I was
Yeah.
just listening, and I'm thinking, and I just, heard the word imposter syndrome. You're posing as something or somebody else. Well, who is that you're opposing? Who do you think that you're opposing or, being that is not you? Um, think about that. And it comes out as basically, the same thing as, finding the evidence to substantiate this belief that you have that you are lacking something or you're something not. The only reason you think that you're not is because you're comparing it to somebody else or other standards that compare yourself to you, where you were, where you are now, and you realize that you've been growing all along. And yes, you have your goals, you have your shining spot where you want to be, and you'll get there. But in the meantime, don't discount the part of the journey that's already been, accomplished and achieved.
Yeah.
And here ended the sermon.
Say it again, I missed the last part.
I said, here ended the sermon.
And my closing comment would be around what Kelly mentioned early on, which is we're all going to have it. If we're growing, this is going to happen. So just kind of, is it coming up now? No, next week, great. Next month, next quarter. Haven't seen it for a while. Am I not growing? So I kind of like the idea. It's gonna come up. I'll give you 2 comments from the people who are with us today before I ask the one action question. Anne is with us and she says, never stop learning because life never stops teaching. So thank you. That's very wise. Thank you. And Anne Marie is with us and she says that when her partner and she were approached about writing their book, their imposter syndrome kicked in hard. But ironically, overcoming it and publishing the book has super helped with the imposter syndrome. So working on that same thing, that was the source of the earlier on.
Yeah.
Our concluding question. If each of us could snap our fingers and almost everyone in the world were to take some action, what would you like that action to be?
Own it. Be brave and tell people that I believe the more of us that say that, yes, yeah, yep, been there, done that. Yep. I think it will normalize it, as Eileen said earlier, and make us feel closer.
As Michael Jackson said, you are not alone. I mean, actually, like 70, I read somewhere that about 70% of the people have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. So chances are that person that you think is perfect has dealt with it as well. So you know what? It's okay. You're not alone. You can go through it. Yeah.
Go through it. Mm-hmm.
And I would say you're going to have a dialogue in your brain. What voice do you want to listen to? Choose wisely. You can only pick one thought at a time to hold on to. Choose wisely.
Mm. Woo!
I'm having imposter syndrome conversation. Own it. You're not alone. Choose wisely. I'll add what I heard from George Valiant, who studied adult development and how people are wise over time and happy over time. Play. So you're going to have this, and how can you play with it? Even if it's hard to play at some point.
Yes. I love that.
Eileen, Kelly, Alex, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this episode on imposter syndrome. And I'm thrilled that you 3 were here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senya, for bringing us together.
Thanks for having me.